Hello and welcome to SAP TechEd 2020. My name is Boris Zarske. I'm a product manager at SAP in the area of cloud and lifecycle management, responsible for software logistics and lifecycle management topics. Together with other colleagues, I'm forging also the DevOps story around SAP. And that will be our topic of today, where I want to present the portfolio of SAP services that allow you to apply DevOps principles efficiently in SAP environments, be it on-premise, hybrid, or in the cloud. For those of you who might already know the story, I point out latest news as well. So please look out for this icon then, typically placed in the upper right corner. Okay, let's start with a very first brief definition of DevOps. And of course, there are many definitions out there. So I'm very happy that I can use that one from Ken Muggeridge from ThoughtWorks, who allowed me to use it here for SAP TechEd, according to which DevOps is a culture where people, regardless of title or background, work together to imagine, develop, deploy, and finally operate a system. So the important point is really that DevOps is not something you can buy as a product or where you just have to enable it with the push of a button. It's really something where you have to change your working environments to come to an open failure culture, where you have to break down silos and come to cross-functional teams, where all the different experts that contribute to the success of a product are coming together in one team with shared goals as well. That does not mean that everyone is responsible for everything. It rather means that also development, for example, is aware of that their increments have later on to be operatable. Otherwise, they might be drawn in some kind of weekend assignments, which normally they tend to avoid or like to avoid. One challenge here is, especially if hybrid solutions should be in focus, that companies need some kind of platform to ensure success in this rapid changing world we are facing today. And according to Gartner, platform technology is required to support continuous change without the loss of continuous integrity. That's a very important aspect because most of you will have business critical applications already running on premise that they now want to extend or improve in a more agile way with cloud software, like coming up with a new compelling UI or just coming up with new business applications without disrupting what you already have. And here, disconnected applications, data, and business processes, those normally prevent that agility you want to achieve, especially during times of rapid change. And here the platform comes in because a platform allows you now to get the best out of this approach with hybrid approaches by streamlining and optimizing, especially applications, data flows, and processes. In SAP environments, that's where SAP Cloud Platform comes in. That exactly offers that. So you see, we are offering integration suite capabilities that make sure that you have data flows in hybrid landscapes, be it between SAP and non-SAP, between cloud and on-premise. In addition, we have extension suite capabilities where you can extend those existing applications with compelling cloud parts as well. Also, this slides outlines a little bit what we will cover in our session today. So some of you might still be focusing on-premise, and also there, they might think about applying continuous integration and DevOps, as we will later see. Otherwise, SAP Cloud Platform will come in for hybrid and cloud native scenarios. So that's why we are also covering large parts of our session today around that topic. How does now our offering look like to build a bridge between development and operations? So we have different building blocks or categories, starting in the lower left with the plan and setup phase. We learn about corresponding concepts and then realize the basic infrastructure accordingly. Then you use that infrastructure to actually come up with changes in the development test phase, making sure that the increment is also being provided with the right quality. Then you propagate it towards production in the deliver and change phase, either automated as part of a pipeline or with more control, especially in enterprise environments. And then finally, in the monitor and operate phase, you make sure that your application is being provided with the right performance and availability. As overarching topic, we have the automated optimize phase, where you constantly look for optimization potential and then bring in your cross-functional team together to realize that potential then. When you now take a look at our offering, meaning our complete portfolio, you see we have a lot of different offerings there. It's best practices guides, it's procedures, it's tools, and SAP Cloud Services as well. And now the next 30 minutes, I will guide you through that different portfolio here, the diverse portfolio, and give you a good understanding what we are offering here, what were the latest news around the topic, and how you can make the first steps if you want to adapt those accordingly. Okay, let's start with the plan and setup phase. So again, it's about learning basic concepts and realizing the infrastructure accordingly. And here we are offering, of course, first of all, some kind of best practices and other support and exchange with you on also the cultural aspects mentioned earlier. One very good first read is the Cloud Platform Planning and Lifecycle Management Guide if you should target hybrid scenarios, because it provides a very good basic understanding of governance, security, and compliance models. Also about the lifecycle management aspects you have to consider when for building and running applications on SAP Cloud Platform. So it's a very good first read to understand those basic concepts. Also, it provides some guidance, like here for account structuring with a lot of examples. One driver for DevOps overall is automation. So you want to automate whatever is possible there. And one very prominent part is continuous integration and continuous delivery. According to that, you are using a central source code repository, like for example, GitHub, and your developers are fetching then the code they want to work on from that repository and push their changes into that after they have performed their development. And that then triggers a continuous integration server, like for example, Jenkins, that then performs an automated build, runs automated tests and packages the outcome. And most importantly, it provides a feedback directly to the developers. So you have a very short feedback cycle. Developers come up with changes and get feedback on the quality and can react on that feedback out of the context again. And that's one of the drivers of the agility you can achieve with cloud software overall. And one key part, of course, is the quality of the tests. So you have to make sure that testing gets part of your developer DNA and your development process. That can also comprise, for example, security tests and scans as well. And if you are confident that the automated tests really reflect the quality of your outcome, of your increment, then you could also think about propagating them automatically towards your runtime. That's continuous delivery then. And that's exactly what the Facebooks and Amazons and Netflixes out there in the market are famous for, that they have several releases a day and can do that in a very high automated approach with pipelines and gain a lot of agility with that. And of course, that makes perfect sense. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of you would like also to benefit from that. When you think now of customers that are rather stemming from on-premise ABAP development, there, of course, we also see some benefits taking a look at CICD. Namely, of course, most straightforward one is also to benefit from continuous integration, where also your ABAP on-premise developers can have automated tests and get direct feedback channel and can react at that out of context then. And making sure that only successfully tested changes get then propagated forwards to your production environment. The other one might be distributed development scenarios, where you have different teams working together on one project, on one system. And that has, of course, also some benefits in terms of flexibility and agility then. And then finally, branch-based development might be another use case we want to enable also for our on-premise development, where you normally have a feature release where you're working on new features, but have also a lot of maintenance releases where you have then to work depending on upcoming requirements. And normally what you do nowadays is that you have several landscapes around it. And with continuous integration approaches with a central source code repository, you could just use the corresponding branches and commit to, for example, maintenance release, work on that, and would not have to set up and operate several landscapes around it. So how do we want to enable continuous integration around ABAP development? For that, we are using our change and transport system, that is part of the ABAP server since ages actually, and have extended it so that it can work with Git, like for example GitHub. And the outcome is the so-called Git-enabled change and transport system, GCTS for short. And when we now take a look at the process, actually the development process for the ABAP developers did not change too much. So they will still use ABAP development tools and SE80, SPro for customizing, and SE09. So meaning they come up with customizing transport, then perform the changes, meaning coding or customizing, and then they release the transport request. So pretty similar to what they know already today. Nevertheless, this is now then pushed into the central repository accordingly, and then the CI server then forwards that to the Q&A systems where automated tests are then performed, and then you have again that closed feedback cycle where then developers see exactly on the quality of the changes and can react on that. And if everything is fine, then this is then merged into the release branch, and then an automatic pull into the follow-up systems is being triggered, and finally it's the changes coming up in the ABAP runtime environment. The actual approach is already out there for quite some time for SAP S/4HANA environments and systems. What latest changes did the colleagues come up with? And you see now it's the first time that this icon comes up to stress the latest news here. So the colleagues came up also with customizing support. So you can also use Git-enabled CTS for customizing. And they also came up with a wizard that allows an easier setup of the ABAP environment accordingly. There's also a session, Dev 208, DevOps for ABAP, try the Git-enabled change and transport system. So highly recommended if you want to learn more about that offering around GCTS. How do we enable our customers to ease adapting CI/CD in SAP environments? There are several offerings around that. The first one has been the best practices guide. And you see, I put the offerings here on some kind of graph with, to the right, you see required expertise and up flexibility. The best practice guides provide some basic understanding of how you can apply CI/CD in SAP environments. And that means, of course, first of all, you have full flexibility because when you understand it, you can adapt it to whatever frameworks and tools you want to use. And in terms of required expertise to actually realize it, you need to have that expertise and build it up then accordingly. Nevertheless, the best practices guide can also be a very good first read. If you want to learn about basic CI/CD concepts, you can still do it and use it as starting point. Here you see a screenshot of the guide. It just provides information about how to implement continuous integration delivery on any CI/CD stack, so Jenkins or other frameworks, and just outlines how you can apply those principles in SAP environments. The next offering is Project Piper. So inside SAP, we have a lot of teams that have quite a lot of expertise around DevOps and CI/CD. And there we just saw the need to derive the best practices or the knowledge from the teams into some kind of more tangible offerings that lower the entry barrier for other teams inside SAP, but also for our partners and customers as well. And that's what Project Piper is all about, deriving those best practices in more tangible best practices and offerings. What does it offer? The most prominent offering are the so-called pipeline templates for Jenkins, which you can just download from GitHub. Sorry. The one is, for example, the pipeline for SAP Cloud SDK, which you can use for cloud application programming model, where you build extensions with a very opinionated way that just offers a golden path of rules and tools that ease you the development of extensions accordingly. And the other one is a general purpose pipeline, which you can use as basic starting point. And then we are offering a step library, meaning single steps you can use and to extend, adapt your pipeline accordingly for SAP aspects especially. That is complemented by typical scenarios, meaning end-to-end descriptions of, for example, a scenario of developing an SAP UI5 application and running that on SAP Cloud Platform. We get a lot of examples from beginning to end. And finally, also some containerized tools where you can download Docker images from GitHub and add those quite easily into your own pipelines. For example, if you're using Microsoft Azure DevOps pipelines, then you can nevertheless quite easily bring in SAP aspects into those as well. The latest changes there are that we are transforming our steps towards Golang, which just enables it to use them not only on Jenkins, but also other frameworks as well. And besides that, we are also broadening the use cases, not only around SAP Cloud Platform, but we are also providing steps now for the Git-enabled change in transport system mentioned before. And we also want to enable the SAP Cloud Platform ABAP environment, for example. There's also a dev session here, a hands-on session, Dev 267, automated SAP Fiori apps testing with continuous delivery, where you can get insights, first of all, about automated front-end testing and get hands-on experience with Project Piper offerings directly. Those offerings got recently complemented by another offering, the CICD Service. So that's a pipeline as a service offering. Just think of you want to benefit from CICD, but you do not want to build up and operate an own CICD infrastructure then in the end. With that, you can go to SAP Cloud Platform and just subscribe to the corresponding service and get then a predefined pipeline where you can automatically then perform tests, builds, and deployments accordingly. We have a very simplified onboarding process. Right now, we are supporting SAP UI5 development and cloud application programming model projects accordingly, but want to extend it, of course, by time. Again, no own infrastructure required to run and build up, no in-depth CI/CD knowledge required. So you can really use it out of the box almost and have a very highly integrated approach with that. Yeah, just stressing this is a new service that came up recently. Okay, so we came up with the setup of the environment, and development is now rather straightforward, where you use that environment to apply the corresponding principles. Of course, we have different programming models for ABAP and cloud development. Also, what you normally do in cloud, for example, is you use several services coming from the SAP Cloud Platform, maybe also persistence, and maybe also some services from hyperscalers like backing services, for example. One aspect here, of course, is to use a development environment. Here, our recommendation is the SAP Cloud Platform Business Application Studio, which is a web being offered as a web service, so you can access it from ever location and have always your environment set up. We have integrated testing capabilities, and we have also working on a higher integration with the just recently mentioned continuous integration delivery service, where then your developers can directly trigger the pipeline out of the development environment and get direct feedback in the development environment as well. Of course, there are also several sessions around that. One is a hands-on session, extend SAP S/4HANA with custom UIs. It's a workshop, and Dev 930 is an expert Q&A session where you can bring up all your questions around Business Application Studio. Another aspect I want to give an outlook at, that's why this draft sticker is up on the upper right corner, is when you think of normal developers, they are using different approaches. So what we propagated before are those high-level coding tools where you have libraries and development environments like the Cloud Application Programming Model, or the ABAP RESTful Application Programming Model, and for example, using core data services. In addition, there are low no-code tools where a developer might also use sometimes, for example, for coming up with a workflow or a business process on UI as well. And finally, of course, out there in the market, there's also this full flexible development approach for cloud-native tools like Kubernetes and serverless. And of course, there might also be teams inside your company that have a lot of expertise in that direction, but most probably not yet in an SAP environment. And here I want to stress two aspects. First of all, for all those different approaches, we want to bring them together into one, some kind of central entry point, where you then just pick and choose the right approach depending on the actual task you are facing. And in addition, especially for the cloud native approach, we saw the demand to lower the entry barrier there and enable the onboarding for teams, especially to apply those approaches in SAP environments. And there you can expect to hear something in the upcoming months where we want to come up with offerings in that direction that shall ease you the cloud native approach also for SAP Cloud Platform projects. Okay, so we have set up the environment, have come up with our increment, and made sure that it is being provided with the right quality by having the corresponding automated tests. Now it's about propagating that toward production. And of course, as mentioned before, you could just use your pipeline and say, okay, I trust the outcome of the automated tests. so that the corresponding increment can be forwarded directly into the runtime, which is, of course, best practices for end-user software, as mentioned before. Nevertheless, in enterprise requirements, it might be a different story, where you might have other requirements and boundary conditions to consider. And here we are offering the integration with transport management as option, where you can apply a standardized enterprise-ready change management process, for example, to add audit trail of changes, where you know who performed which change in which production sub-account and when. You can also establish some kind of separation of concerns, which first of all might sound like a contradiction to DevOps, but the idea here is that you have a defined handover from your development team into your operations team, the operations colleagues inside the same team, of course, but there you have the defined handover. And finally, you might have also hybrid applications where you have changes on-premise and in the cloud, and you want to make sure that, for example, the change does not reach the production sub-account on the cloud platform before also the enablement of the corresponding services did reach the production on-premise system. And here you can come up with change management where you handle those changes that have an interdependency as in one cluster and make sure that they are being propagated as one unit, then, so to say. Here we are offering two approaches. One is the classic change and transport system again, which is part of the ABAP server, as mentioned before. And that makes, of course, perfect sense if you have an ABAP-centric landscape, might have already CTS Plus in case, and then you can extend it to also handle cloud artifacts, namely in the format of the so-called multi-target application archives, MTA for short. MTA is our approach to put all cloud artifacts that build an application, meaning all modules, into one archive, together with technical description of the contents and the interdependencies. And that allows our cloud platform runtime to take such an archive and to look into it. It knows exactly to which runtime each module shall be deployed, in which order, which technical prerequisites have to be fulfilled. And with that, it's enabling an automated deployment of that artifact. And if you have CTS Plus already in place and know MTA is what you will use for the time being and the upcoming time, then there's no reason why not using CTS Plus also for the corresponding artifacts. Otherwise, our way forward is an SAP Cloud Platform Transport Management Service, which is a cloud service of transport management. So it's a little bit more easier to use and a little bit more cloud-like, and targeting, first of all, for scenarios where you might not want to bring in an on-premise ABAP system. For example, CTS might run on your SAP Solution Manager, being handled by a different team, and they might be a little bit reluctant to allow access for every cloud project. Also, we are targeting to tackle more and more application-specific content that comes up. So SAP Cloud Platform offers a lot of services, and many of them also come up with own content artifacts. Think of API management, business rules, workflow. So they have also content artifacts that are normally not stored in central source code repositories. And here we want to allow you to nevertheless apply a standardized approach for handling those in a controlled way as well. And in the long run, we are also targeted to handle also content artifacts coming from our SAP Cloud solutions, like, for example, SAP SuccessFactors. If there should be content artifacts relevant, then we want to offer the option to have that integrated into one approach accordingly. Okay, how does now the complete picture look like with your data center here to the right and cloud to the left? For your on-premise systems and your data center stuff, we have CTS and all the different flavors. It's CTS, enhanced CTS, Git-enabled CTS, as mentioned in the beginning. They are there for on-premise and they will stay there. So there are no plans to get rid of those or anything like that. With the side remark that you can use the enhanced change and transport system also to handle MTA-based content coming from Cloud Platform. Otherwise, as mentioned before, our way forward is the cloud-based transport management service for the cloud artifacts. And if you now say, okay, I want to get the best of both worlds, saying, okay, my developers want to have a very agile approach, then you can say, okay, they can use a pipeline, highly automated, to verify their single developer changes. But as soon as it's getting towards the production environment, you then have a defined handover out of the pipeline into transport management as depicted here. The good thing is our offerings around CICD, like Project Pipeline and CICD Service, they offer an out-of-the-box integration where we have step libraries, steps in a step library, which you can use to enhance your pipeline so that a handover into transport management is performed automatically. Both CTS and the Transport Management Service on Cloud Platform are integrated into higher level change management approaches on Solution Manager, like change request management and quality gate management, for example, for hybrid changes. So if you have corresponding requirements, like for auditing reasons, then you can have those playing together and have them being coordinated by charm accordingly. Okay, what were the latest changes for Transport Management Service? We came up with, for example, this charm integration recently, but also other features like job scheduling, and again, with the plan to more and more extend also the content coverage around SAP Cloud Platform and SAP Cloud solutions overall. We also came up with a new service, the SAP Cloud Platform Content Agent Service, which just allows a better integration for Cloud Platform integration content running on Cloud Foundry into transport management. And there's also a session, Dev 104, Change Control Management, Building a Bridge for CICD in a hybrid solution. So again, highly recommended if you should want to learn more about also the interplay with change management, then this is a recommended session as well. How could now a stepwise approach look like? So you can start with a very simple pipeline saying, okay, your development teams use Project Piper or the continuous integration delivery service, come up with very quick results where they have a running pipeline and can benefit from the direct feedback channel. When it comes to release time, you can regain control of those development projects again by having that defined handover into transport management. And in the future, if interdependencies should come up, you want to handle or other requirements, then you can still have the integration into high-level change management running on SAP Solution Manager as shown here. So there's no dead end. You can really have a very simple start and have all options available to expand as needed by time. Okay, so we have now come up with the increment, provided it into production. Now we want to make sure that it's being provided with the right performance and availability. And of course, SAP Cloud Platform does offer transparency by monitoring services and logging services where you have dashboards where you can always take a look and know what is going on with your application. Nevertheless, when you now take a look at one example application I've mentioned before, where you have different microservices, here shown as app modules, where you might use several services from SAP Cloud Platform, have a persistency, or might even use hyperscaler services like backing services, your site reliability engineering team, of course, has to strive that it's keeping up the solution up and running around the clock. And for that, it has to serve all those different bits and pieces. And how do we now support the teams instead of just using the monitoring and always looking if something is changing? We are providing two offerings mainly. One is the alert notification service that allows you to subscribe to events coming from the cloud platform, be it from used services, be it from the hyperscalers, from the persistencies, but you can also come up with custom alerts where your own microservices then provide corresponding alerts and send them via the same channel then. And then that you notify via the channel of choice, meaning email, Slack, Microsoft Teams, integration into ITSM tools, for example. Yeah, that is available there for some time now already. And of course, the colleagues are constantly working to extend it, meaning covering more of the content types and covering more of the channels then. Of course, we are also offering open APIs, but if you should miss some integration options, just let us know. And the development teams are normally keen to offer a corresponding solution in short notice. The second offering is the so-called automation pilot service, and that is really a new service that came up recently, where you can react automatically to alerts or automate recurring DevOps operation tasks as well. So what does it offer in detail? So it allows, first of all, some kind of abstraction from the actual technical platform. So you can easily automate commands without actual coding required. And the main part are different catalogs around alert remediation, lifecycle management tasks, or DevOps tasks. Like, for example, here, app handling, restarting, stopping, checking status, database commands, update, also start and stop, monitoring, you name it. Right now, we have over 130 automated commands in an SAP context, which you can use to build up and extend with your own scripts then as well and share own catalogs then. And we also have a high integration into our tools and third-party providers. How does that look like in an example again? So here we have our application again, and an event comes up like service stops working. That would now trigger the alert notification service, which of course would inform your operations team via the channel of choice, like Microsoft Teams, for example. But it could also trigger the automation pilot service directly. And if you have configured a corresponding command there, then, for example, restarting the application could already solve the issue. So for your operations team, it means they got informed that an issue came up, automation pilot service did kick in and could solve the issue. So there's no immediate action required, but of course I should take a look later on to see what was the root cause and see if I can optimize some way. Otherwise, if it could not solve it, it could have already gathered all log files from the point in time when actually the issue came up, which also helps you to identify then the root cause and come up with a solution accordingly. I did not mention it. We have also a session here, Dev 212, which is a 20 minutes breakout session. Its title is Once you deploy it, you should operate it, but how? Highly recommended, 20 minutes very well spent to learn more and see some hands-on demo examples of those services. I did not mention explicitly yet, but of course, yeah, here we are constantly working on tighter integration of all our services around DevOps accordingly. And of course, we are also offering integration into the application lifecycle management offerings, meaning SAP Solution Manager, SAP Focused Run, and more also SAP Cloud ALM. Yeah, SAP Solution Manager and Focused Run, there we have hybrid supportability offerings since a longer time already. Namely, we have, for example, integration monitoring, where you can monitor data flows in hybrid landscapes. We have an exception management, which is a central cockpit where exceptions from a hybrid landscape can come in from on-premise and your cloud solutions. For example, also the alerts coming from SAP Cloud Platform alert notification can be forwarded into exception management. They get a complete picture and know which team to involve to investigate the corresponding exceptions. Then we have user monitoring and trace analysis, which just show an early indicator that something should go wrong with your application and help you to dig down into the root cause and know which team to involve again to get it solved. Of course, we have also a lot of sessions around those topics. So one example is INT 127, operation of hybrid landscapes with SAP Focused Run, if you want to learn more about the latest improvements there. In addition, SAP Cloud ALM is coming up or is available already, but also in terms of operation tasks. And yeah, just to make that clear, it's complementing the other offerings. So it's not replacing that, but it's rather targeted at cloud-centric customers. And I want to stress that, first of all, they plan to also offering capabilities for operations like monitoring, diagnosis, and analytics, but also eventing and ops automation. And I want to stress that, of course, although Cloud ALM has a broader focus, not only on SAP Cloud Platform, but also on other cloud solutions, that we are working together with the colleagues to stream in our tools and services like alerting and ops automation, also in the same channel, if you should consider to use Cloud ALM for your projects accordingly. The same applies also for transport management service, for example. Also here it is planned to offer change management capabilities on SAP Cloud ALM, and there we would also integrate accordingly. Of course, there's also a session, IIS 121, which is operation of cloud-centric landscapes with SAP Cloud ALM for operations. Again, lecture. Okay, now we come to the final phase, the automate and optimize phase. And here we are working on some kind of integrated DevOps management, where we want to bring in all those different aspects I've mentioned so far into one view, meaning some kind of cockpit or portal, where you see exactly how your application is behaving. You see key performance indicators and SLAs as well. You see also if there's some immediate action required, like expiring certificates, for example, and you are pointed to some optimization potential there, where you then can bring again your diverse cross-functional team again and work together then on identifying those and yeah, actually gaining benefit of that and optimizing the overall process for your application accordingly. So it's rather meant to really bring in all those different aspects into one view, which goes a little bit into the direction of some suite capabilities where you have DevOps really in one entry point and in the end. And yeah, you can expect to hear more about it in the upcoming months. So we want to provide first versions there soon. Also at TechEd, there's a hands-on, or sorry, there's a workshop DT 269 Rethink Workshop Customization for SAP S/4HANA, where you see a first glimpse of one part of that, a so-called developer portal, where you see how that comes into the overall story and in which direction we are heading there accordingly. Okay, I know it's been quite a ride, but when I want to summarize now, I hope you have seen that we have really a holistic offering of different offerings around DevOps. So starting from the actual setup and planning phase, where you get basic understandings with a lot of best practices and CICD enablement, be it on-premise with GCDS and Project Piper and the cloud continuous integration and delivery service. For development, we are offering programming models, development environments, and again, you would use then CICD accordingly with a very agile approach. For delivery, you can either use an automated approach or integration into transport and change management, if you should have more strict boundary conditions. For monitoring and operations, we have monitoring logging capabilities, we have alert notification, we have ops automation, and also integration options like, for example, into SAP Solution Manager, Focused Run, and SAP Cloud ALM. And we are working on an integrated DevOps management. Key parts here is that we are covering really the complete lifecycle, not only CI/CD. And we have also offerings, especially for hybrid environments, where you might have already your center of gravity on-premise, and nevertheless want to have first steps and projects into the cloud and can integrate those cloud aspects into an existing on-premise operations processes, for example, around SAP Solution Manager accordingly. And also we are offering processes around the different environments SAP Cloud Platform offers, for example. So you can stick to one transport mechanism, one alerting, one automation approach, no matter if you're using Neo, Cloud Foundry, Kubernetes in the future. If you now want to make first steps, I also have some call to action here on that slide put together for you. So of course, we have a community page for DevOps with SAP in overall, where you can come up with questions and interact with the community. We have a lot of SAP help portal information with documentation around DevOps with Cloud Platform, about GCDS as well. We have several blog post series around the topic, which outline a little bit more detail what I have presented today. Also, we have a learning journey around DevOps with SAP Cloud Platform, and we have the already mentioned best practices guides, like the planning and lifecycle management guide and the CICD best practices. In addition, our services are available also in trial environments. So if you want to have hands-on experience, you can go there without additional charge and just subscribe to the transport management service, alerting, business application studio, CI&D service, alert notification and automation pilot service, and use, for example, also our onboarding missions. In addition, we are working also on an all-open SAP course planned to be provided in the beginning of next year. Of course, here's some further references we have seen throughout the session and some further public links I want to stress as well. Of course, you can also continue your learning experience from SAP TechEd as outlined on that slide. Apart from that, you see my contact information here, so feel free to reach out to me in case of any questions should come up, for example, after discussing the topic with your colleagues. Otherwise, thanks a lot for your attention and enjoy the rest of SAP TechEd 2020.
Woo!